So when I was thinking about launching a business to help short-term rental owners maximize their investment, I thought long and hard about how I was going to do it. And as I thought through all the various ways I could approach this, I came down to one model that's called the co-hosting model. So you've probably heard that term, co-hosting or co-host, if you've been in the short-term rental industry for a little while. In this video, I want to break down what that means and how it compares to a property manager, because that's the thing people usually think about when they hand off management of their short-term rental to somebody else. They think of a property manager. But a co-host, what is that? Okay, let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to talk about 5 different aspects of the business and how a co-host manages it versus a property manager. So let's go. Number 1, where's the money? So probably the biggest difference between the two that I just want to get out right away is that property managers are really sort of an A to Z solution. They do everything for a property, and that includes taking in the money. So when there's a booking on Airbnb or VRBO or whatever it might be, they collect the money, and at the end of the month, they subtract all the expenses and then pay out the owner the profit. And that's the model of the property manager. Because they accept money and because they deal with money, states often have requirements to be licensed to be a property manager. The co-host model is a little different because co-hosts typically do not take the money. The money that is earned through revenues from Airbnb or VRBO or direct booking, etc., goes straight to the owner. And then at the end of the month, the co-host would then just invoice the fee to that owner. So in essence, that's the difference in how the two handle money, and it's a big one, but it's one that I want to just get out there right away. Number 2 is size. Now, this is definitely not a hard and fast rule, but typically co-hosts handle fewer properties than property managers do. Now, of course, there are very large co-hosts that manage a lot and very small property managers that don't handle very much, but in general, that's typically how it works. A co-host may have 2 properties, 5 properties, 10, 20, 30, but you typically don't see a whole lot more than 30 properties being managed by a co-host. Whereas a property manager could have 3 or 4 or 5, but they could also have 50, 100, 200, you name it. And there are some very large property managers. In the US, for example, the largest 2 are Vacasa and Evolve. Vacasa has over 8,000 properties they manage, while Evolve has over 6,000 properties in the US. And that's incredibly huge. And that's like the extreme end of property managers. But you'll see many with 50 properties, 100 properties, 200 properties. That's not that uncommon. So size is definitely something that you tend to see different between co-hosts and property managers. Number 3, personalization and systems. Because co-hosts tend to be smaller, they also tend to be more personalized to the owner. So they have the ability to personalize their services to a specific owner's needs. They're usually more flexible with their contracts, usually more flexible with their terms. Not always, but in general, especially for specific things like, they could be very personalized in terms of the marketing plan they put together for a property to really market that property well, based on the property itself and where it's located and, et cetera. Whereas property managers typically have a certain approach they follow, like a recipe that they follow, because they have to do that to manage so many properties. They have to have very clear processes in place. Now, that can be good and bad. The good could be that they've got systems to be able to address issues that come up. But the bad thing is that sometimes for an owner, it can feel like bureaucracy, or it can feel like a lot of red tape and not a lot of flexibility. It's just part of the game when you deal with a property manager. Number 4 is listing ownership. Now, this is a biggie. Property managers, because they handle everything from A to Z, they take the money, they do everything. They also put the listing of that property on Airbnb and VRBO on their account. So that makes it easy for them to be able to manage many, many properties because they're all in the same account. So what happens? If a property is listed on a certain account for a long time, it collects reviews and feedback, and it's all captured on that listing. And over time, you could have quite a few reviews that have built up over a year, 2 years, 3 years, etc. So what's the problem then? Well, the problem is if you decide to leave, because if you want to leave that property manager, you're essentially taking your listing off of their account, and you basically lose all of your reviews. And now, if the reviews weren't that good and the property manager wasn't doing a very good job, then maybe it's not that big a deal. But if they have been doing a pretty decent job and you've got a lot of really good reviews, not being able to move off of their platform and lose the reviews is a big deal. I tell owners all the time when I talk to them, the reviews are an asset that really belong to you, the owner. And that's the way I think it should be, which is why I structured my business in the co-hosting way, which is really where the owner owns the listing. So you as the owner, for example, would have the listing under your name, and your co-host would then be the one managing that listing. Why is that advantageous? Because all the reviews you get, everything, all the feedback is captured on that listing. And if you change your mind and you decided to go with somebody else, or you decide to do it yourself, you don't lose all those reviews. Those reviews stay with you because you own the account. So that's a big plus. And for me, as an owner myself, that's how I would want it. I wouldn't want to give all my reviews up to a property manager. I want to have them myself. And so that is a big advantage I see to co-hosting. And frankly, one of the big reasons why I felt that approach was better for my business and for my clients. Number 5 is cost. Now, generalizations here again, but co-hosts are generally less expensive in terms of fees and all that than a property manager. Just think about it. A property manager is typically managing many, many, many properties. They have a lot of systems and processes in place. They probably have employees that they have to hire to maintain the whole operation. That's not cheap. Typically, property managers will have a higher fee than a co-host would because co-hosts typically don't have as many employees. So their costs are a little lower. So they don't have to necessarily charge as much as a property manager would. But in this game, you do tend to get what you pay for. So, going with an ultra cheap co-host or an ultra cheap property manager, you're going to get ultra cheap service. If I go back to those really big property managers, for example, like Evolve is pretty famous for their 10% fee, but I know owners that have been under that model, and sure, they collect a 10% fee, but they don't do very much besides putting the listing up and showing it and dealing with guests, and that's pretty much it. A lot of their other stuff really falls back to the owner. So as with anything, the less you pay, the less you're probably going to get in terms of value back to you. Now, I've talked about these 5 aspects that differentiate a co-host from a property manager. I just want to talk about just some additional notes that you should know about. First of all, the term co-host can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. It's not really a hard and fast defined terms, quote unquote. So if you're talking to a co-host, potentially doing business with them and hiring them, make sure you read their agreement, understand in good detail what it is they're going to do and what they're not going to do, because you're going to see a lot of variety in terms of what co-hosts will do and won't do in the market. In my case, for example, I'm more of a full service co-host. So I do pretty much everything that a property manager would do except, collect money. But a lot of co-hosts aren't necessarily that way. So it's something to think about as you approach working with a co-host. The second point I want to make is that it's very important also to be on the same page with the co-host or property manager. So just talking through expectations, understanding what their services are, and what they're not going to do. Those are really important things as you get involved to make sure you're going into it eyes wide open. So in conclusion, why would somebody want to pick a co-host? Well, that's probably an owner that would like more personalized service, to perhaps have some lower costs than a property manager, to have some flexibility, to have more of their attention, more of a boutique approach to the property. That's probably where a co-host is really going to shine. Whereas For a property manager, it's really ideal for people that want systems and processes and everything ironed out, want consistency, want the scalability of adding more properties, even if that comes at a higher cost. That's typically the benefits of a property manager. I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but in this video, I really wanted to just describe to you what the differences were because they can be confusing. So that I've talked about co-hosts and property managers and cleared up that confusion, you may be wondering, what are the biggest factors for success in short-term rentals? Well, I created a video on that topic which you can check out right here. Thanks for watching the Immigrant Wealth channel.